Meghan.
Hi, everyone. So we're lucky and fortunate enough to have Congressman Eric Swalwell on today. I am so honored to have you on. I'm going to start with just a few questions. No, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm a little nervous. I'm so excited to have you on.
You're a pro. That's what you do.
You're never a pro at podcasting. I don't think it exists. So I just want to be real with you. And I'm going to start because I do consider myself a mental health podcaster. And with everything that's going on right now, with the loss of, Congressman Hortman and her husband and, ICE and Alex Padilla getting pushed, what is it like for you right now to be dealing with this?
Yes, we are seeing an aspiring dictator in the current president. He's not achieved dictatorship yet, but he is using our government to go after his political enemies, and his rhetoric is inspiring radicals to do the same thing and to take, their own sense of justice in their own hands. And so, my wife and I, we have lived for the last 8 years, under a threat environment where we receive dozens of death threats a week, and have to make decisions about our safety, our family safety, my staff's safety. But the one overriding decision that we have made is that it's not going to deter me from doing my job, and that I'm not going to shrink or hide under the bed, because I know that often is the aim. Now, it's quite costly in time. My chief of staff would tell you she probably spends 8 hours a week with the FBI and the Capitol Police and the Department of Justice, dealing with threats. It's quite costly in money and what you spend on security, because the Congress does not have the resources to protect the members. And there's this sense that we're going to see a member of the U.S. Congress killed, that there's no way with this threat environment and the temperature in the country and the lack of resources to protect members, that's not going to happen. And that's a very unfortunate place to be. My best days, I take the security as seriously as possible. My worst days, if I'm being honest, you are jaded by it and your guard is down, and you're just so frustrated and fatigued by it that it doesn't even register with you the way it probably should, because it's just oh, great, another threat has come in. But I know as a father, my primary responsibility is, to protect my family, and we do that the best we can, but will not be deterred from speaking up.
Well, I think it's so important. I know that you've been going to town halls and doing things in other people's districts, and I thank you for that as somebody that lives in California. I know your bio and your background, and you grew up a Republican. I grew up a Republican as well in Washington, D.C. At this point, I think it's more than politics. I wish the word politics didn't even exist anymore, because like you said, we're in a very scary, scary time. So I appreciate you going to these meetings and,
even at that meeting, at the town hall, there were about 10 MAGA supporters there who were counter protesting, and that's their right, but it's not their right to try and physically block me from entering the building, which is what they did. And then they stood outside the town hall and had a very loud bullhorn with a siren noise that they just ran for almost the entire 2 hours. And we were louder inside than they were. There were about 1,000 people inside and only 10 of them on the outside. And we weren't going to let them control the narrative or dominate, that gathering. But that's just the reality of, as you would say, politics today.
And I think as well, it's part of their scare tactic, correct? Right. I think what's happening is they're trying to scare everybody to, I'm doing this peaceful march this weekend. in Manhattan Beach, and with a bunch of moms, we're organizing it, and all of South Bay is invited, and I'm getting all this hate. Whereas, we're just trying to do something to say that what's happening right now with ICE and these raids is horrific and not okay. And so I think the scare tactic piece of it is one of the biggest pieces of it. Do you agree?
Yes. Yeah. The aim is for people not to go to the town square, and for politicians, to not speak out against these abuses of power. That is the hope. But again, I guess because of how jarring it was to have them physically block me on the way in and same thing on the way out, like their hope as I think about that scenario is that defines the event for me. And as I got into our security vehicle with my staff, I know they were, jolted by it. But the first thing I said to my staff was, wow, that was such a great event. 1,000 people showed up with a few days notice because they want to see a different direction in their congressional district. And I intentionally said that, even though we had just had these folks in our face trying to block us, because I didn't want that to define it for them, because that's the goal is that, that even 10 people compared to 1,000 people, that their obstructive ways and their threats and their vile language, they would want you to see that as a mirage, and that it represents more than just 10 people. And it was just 10 people. And we had 1,000 people who were in there and wanted to know what they could do to make things better in their community.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that the audience, like right now, because it's like the Democratic Party has such a bad name and everyone's like, what are you doing? What are you doing to protect us? The ICE that's on the streets is in my area now. They're all over California. They're kidnapping people en masse. So, I think more and more people are leaning towards like, what can you do to help us right now, Congress?
We have to give people, as you would say, things to do, action items. Of course, like your event this weekend matters. The No Kings rallies, 2,000 of them, 6 to 7 million people across the country, largest protest ever. I mean, that was important. But at the end of the day, governing is about winning. And so we have to take small victories and build to big victories. And so I look at April of this year, the Wisconsin Supreme Court race there. Elon Musk spent $30 million because he knew that the judge who would win that race would be the tie-breaking vote to decide whether the 2 gerrymandered congressional seats would stay Republican or be given back to the Democrats, because the math and the geography they're Democratic seats. And people showed up, not just Wisconsinites, but people all over the country sent postcards, text messages, made phone calls, sent small dollar contributions, flew to Wisconsin to knock on doors. And it was a blowout. It was a double-digit victory that beat Musk and his money and the judge that would keep that dirty map in place. We have seen in special elections across the country that people are showing up. And then this November in Pennsylvania, there's a state Supreme Court race where 2 judges are on the ballot. And we know from past elections that Donald Trump will ask people not to certify elections. And Pennsylvania is a very consequential state. The New Jersey and Virginia governor's races, those will matter to have Democratic governors there who, will ensure free and fair elections in their states next year for the midterms and then 2028 for the general election. So aiming people to these races and telling them that, politics is and your advocacy is a muscle that you have to continue to exercise, that these races matter. And so what I've been trying to do is to direct people, to, places that matter so that they find fulfillment, and most importantly, that we can win. And then just like in sports, and for me as, former college athlete, and that's the way I was able to go to college, everything's a sports analogy. Like in politics, in sports, momentum is everything. And so winning begets more winning. And so going into 2026 with a winning streak of having won Wisconsin, New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania, that's going to lift our confidence. And as you said, we need to lift our confidence right now because our brand is in crisis. And so we need to lift our confidence. And the only way to do it, as we would say in the Bay Area, is just win, baby. That was the Oakland Raiders mantra for a long time. And we can do that.
Let me ask you, and I love the sports analogies, by the way. Let me ask you, what's being done to keep our elections safe?
So first and foremost, Democratic governors and secretaries of states have to maximize democracy in their states. So today, it's not enough that California is more voter friendly than Georgia. Like we have a majority in the Assembly and the Senate in California, a governor and a secretary of state who are Democrats and believe in free and fair elections. We can't just be the lowest common denominator. We have to max out democracy. And so I've worked with Mark Elias from Democracy Forward, who I think is the best voting rights lawyer in America. And we see a number of ways that democratically run states and counties can really increase access to the polls. I'll just give you one example. Every county in America should guarantee to its voters, especially in blue states, that you will be able to vote on election day in 30 minutes or less. So your pizza should not come faster than it takes for you to be able to vote, or your Uber Eats order. And so putting in place that requirement and a fine structure for the counties to pay individuals who have to wait longer than 30 minutes, I think would incentivize making voting easier. And by the way, we know of a number of examples of Republican groups who intentionally will flood polling places and create the mirage of a long line. People who have already voted aren't registered to vote there. They just stand in line to create the perception of a long line. So it's a deterrent to somebody who goes to vote. So we should have polling places guaranteed, especially in blue states, 30 minutes or less, you'll be able to vote. That's just one example of what we can do in the blue states. And then in the red states where they're trying to make it harder to go to the ballot box, we continue to win in court. And so that's why I tell people, it's not just like supporting a congressional campaign. It's not just supporting, a governor's race. If you see organizations who are going to the courts, from Democracy Forward to the ACLU to many others, like those organizations also matter. And the court cases that they win open up access to the polls. And then when we win the majority at the midterms in the House, and I actually see a real path in the Senate, we will have the leverage to make sure that Donald Trump does not end free and fair elections in the 2028 election. So winning is everything, but it's not just winning at the ballot box, it's winning court cases. And we've had a lot of success, even with Trump-appointed judges.
Like the Supreme Court, like Amy Coney Barrett, like people that for sure he thought he was going to get to vote in all his favor. So I think that that's super important to point out. So as a Democrat, as a leader, as somebody that supports you, my question to you is, what is the party doing to kind of move on and get younger people? I mean, it's such a scary time to want to get into politics right now, right? But what are you doing to kind of get an exit strategy for the boomers and get young people excited to vote and get out there? Because I think everybody's just so stressed and upset and scared, So
to my colleagues, I tell them, always be on. And always be on means always be honest. Because if you are everywhere, just as I'm doing your podcast earlier today, I did a Christian podcast called The New Evangelist. And I'm trying to do as many Christian podcasts as possible because 68% of the voters in the last election identified as Christian. So we should not let Republicans define our faith or accuse us of having a lack of faith. We should go into these spaces. And by always being on, people see who you really are, and they get the zero draft answer from you rather than like the fourth or fifth draft when you do like a cable news interview and you sound stuffy and scripted like a boring politician who is trying to project themselves as a politician. So I think first and foremost, it is always be on. Two, I call it tell me a story or bore me. We have to start rooting our policies not in like the legislative text or the legalese, but the stories of who is being helped and who's being hurt. For example, every single American should know the story of the 4-year-old American citizen battling cancer, the child who was deported under Trump's ICE policy. We should all know the story in Southern California of the gentleman who has 3 sons who were Marines, who was tackled to the ground by ICE agents earlier this week. So we have to not root this in, as I said, legalese and legislative text, but it's a story. And to me, the story is no one signed up for this as it relates to these policies. No one signed up for, hardworking friends and neighbors of ours to be running through Home Depot parking lots for their lives from masked men. That's not what anyone signed up for. So I think tell me a story or bore me is another way we can learn from this. And then I also see it as these times have revealed to me and so many of my colleagues who have stepped up who should lead and who should leave. And so I'm inspired by Jasmine Crockett and Robert Garcia. Congratulations to Robert. He's former mayor of Long Beach, represents the Long Beach area. He's now the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee. When we're in the majority, that's the committee that has subpoena power. That's where Elon Musk is going. That's where the Attorney General, that's where so many people who, are violating the rights of Americans are going to have to go to answer to the American people for what they're doing to enable Donald Trump's policies. And so that is inspiring. Maxwell Frost, one of the youngest members of Congress from Florida. So you're seeing a lot of people step up. And I hope that inspires young people to believe that they have voices in Congress who see them and are fighting for them.
Well, I think it's also so important to point out you mentioned Elon Musk, but the damage that Doge has done. Like you said, so many of these things have been overturned. I interviewed Ben, I can't remember his last name, sorry, Ben, but he was one of the forest rangers that lost his position and, was out of work and then hired back. So what do you say about all the damage? You brought up Elon Musk that has been done by Doge. What are we doing to help save the damage that's already been done? Also,
no one signed up for cancer scientists to be fired, air traffic controllers to be fired. And now traveling is just a nightmare in America. To fire the people who run Social Security offices for your hard-earned Social Security checks. And so in the majority, that's where we have the leverage to put all of those people back to work. But I will tell you, if Donald Trump continues to fire, the most expert of scientists in America, and they're not put back to work soon, they're going to be hired. They're just not going to be hired in America. We have already seen China, Europe, Canada offer visas and funding to our best NIH researchers, and a brain drain has taken place right now. And you may not be able to get that back. Once you move your family, to another country, and that's where your research and your dollars are, that's going to be really hard to replace. And so that's what I fear, is that if we don't, tell that story and save that funding now, it's going to be much more expensive and take a lot longer to get it back in the future.
Can I ask you for the sake of time, 2 more questions? Where do you think that all of these people are going? I mean, now they're starting, I'm very passionate about the ICE thing because it's happening in our neighborhoods, and it's really, really scary for families, and people are afraid to go to their jobs. And this is going to hit everybody's, we're all going to suffer from this. And that's the worst part, is people are kind of living in a bubble and not realizing that at the end of the day, these are human beings. It reminds me of the early beginnings of Nazi Germany, and people get mad when I say that, but it's a fact. These are human beings. Well,
it's also what J.D. Vance described Donald Trump as being. No one has been harsher on Donald Trump than his own vice president, who said Donald Trump is America's Hitler, right? So that's J.D. Vance. But people will see when they go out to eat that either your favorite restaurant is going to be closed or it's going to cost more to eat there. When you go on a family vacation, it's going to cost more at the hotel that you're staying at. As a parent of 3 little kids, I know that childcare is everything. We can't do anything in our professional lives, my wife and I, she also works, unless childcare is sorted out. And finding affordable childcare is already difficult. And having a legal immigrant workforce that can, contribute to that brings down the cost. And so and then by the way, going to the grocery store and, the food that comes from our farm workers who are being chased through the farm fields today, that's going to cost more. But again, more than any of that, these are our friends and neighbors. And going back to my own rule, tell me a story or bore me. In Livermore, California, a father, we call him a Granada dad. That's a high school, Granada High School. There's a gentleman named Miguel Lopez. He worked at a winery, has a family, that he was supporting in the community, went to his court case, went to his court date for his immigration case, and ICE picked him up there, and he has been sent back to Mexico, even though the judge told the administration, do not deport him. They sent him back. So that's who's being taken out of our community. It's people like my constituent, Miguel Lopez.
Well, I just have to say in closing really quickly, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being real. I think there's so many people that are like, I don't trust the politicians. I'm angry. We're all angry. We need leadership. And I truly see you as a leader. So thank you for that.
It would be a mistake if I didn't ask for any mental wellness tips.
I was going to ask you that. You took my question.
Yeah. So I do is I run every day. If I'm not able to run, I will go crazy. And I think that's where I feel most liberated as far as my mindset. And then I try and take 15 minutes of just absolute silence. You could call it meditating, but just 15 minutes, of silence a day to just try and get things sorted in my head. And so if you have other hacks for me, I welcome them.
I mean, I'm the guru. I'm joking. I think for me, I'm a beach girl. I go walk by the beach every day, and I tell my listeners all the time, right now, we're being bombarded by negativity and scary news. And you're getting threatened. I'm getting threatened for doing this walk. We have to find the good right now and the good in people. And there are good people out there. So stick together, because I believe there's more of us than there are of them.
I agree.
And as you know, in history, in all of history, you never hear about Saddam Hussein winning or Hitler winning.
Right.
They're going to go down in history on the wrong side. And
the good guys always win.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. It was such an honor to meet you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Everyone, keep going. You matter. Your story matters.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.